Hello everyone, welcome to sqadia.com. I'm Dr. Hina Khan, and today the topic of our lecture comprises of the sleep and particularly the tic disorders. Now, how do you basically define the tic disorders? There is a range of disorders that encompasses this word, which is known as the tic disorders. We also know a condition which is known as Tourette syndrome. Then we have the transient vocal and the complex motor tic disorders. So it is basically dependent upon the clinical condition of the patient that we diagnose him with a Tourette syndrome, or either it is a complex or a simple motor tic disorder. So particularly in this section, we'll be focusing on a sleep disorder, which is known as narcolepsy. We'll be defining this condition. First of all, what is the diagnostic criteria that will be given over here? How do you diagnose a person to be suffering from narcolepsy is again very interesting. The causative factors, they obviously include the internal factors, the internal personality traits of the individual, as long as it's also the environmental factors. They play a pivotal role in the development of this condition, which is known as narcolepsy, characterized by an excessive sleep. So the statistics will be discussed over here, as it's an underreported disorder. Usually the people won't come up to the clinicians with this disorder, so they're diagnosed very rarely. But we'll be discussing the epidemiology of this narcolepsy over here. Then how does it affect the day-to-day life of the person is also discussed over here. The treatment modalities which we consider when we have diagnosed a person to be suffering from narcolepsy will also be discussed in this very first section. Moving on to the second section, we'll be discussing the tic disorders particularly. First of all, the definition of this disorder is again very interesting, defining a tic individually and then defining a tic disorder. What are the different variants of this tic disorder? And then how do you basically deal with these motor tics, as well as there's another variant of these tics which is known as the vocal tics. And then we can also categorize these motor tics as to be a complex variety, or it can be a simple variety of motor tics. In the third section, we'll be focusing on the symptoms of the tic disorder particularly. So there is a condition known as lalias. So we'll be considering these different echolalias and coprolalias. We'll be discussing what are these terminologies that we usually use when we have a patient of this tic disorder or Tourette syndrome at our hand. Then how do you basically go about and take the history? It can be the history which is taken from the patient, and it can be a collateral history which is taken from the primary caregivers. Then we have the onset of the tic, which is very important because that will give you the causative factors that made the person develop that tic disorder. So that will be discussed over here in this very third section. Then we'll move on to the fourth section, which is the tic disorder diagnosis. Again, when we have a condition, one should know how do you basically diagnose it, what is the particular criteria for the diagnosis that will be discussed over here. So we'll be discussing the frequency of this tic disorder. The DSM-4 5 criteria will be discussed over here along with it. And then the duration of the tic disorder is again very important. So we'll be considering this duration, because whenever we are making a diagnosis of Tourette syndrome, these motor and these vocal tics should be present in that person for more than 1 year. The other symptoms which are usually present along with this tic disorder will also be discussed over here in this fourth section. In the fifth and the final section, we'll be discussing the differential diagnosis of tic disorder, and we'll be discussing the role of genetics for the development of tic disorder over here. And then we'll be also discussing the comorbidities that can be present in a person who is diagnosed with the tic disorder. So I hope you want to learn more about these sleep and tic disorders. So do watch the other sections to this lecture as well.